The night is dark, but the fire is warm, and there is safety in the light. Welcome to the campfire. Sit a spell, rest your weary bones, and let the wood smoke carry your troubles away. Tonight, we're doing things a bit different. We're drifting away from the main path to explore the quiet corners of the world, the stories that happen in the margins while the heroes are busy saving the day. This is the first of our Sidequest series, those little sparks of history that deserve their own light. Before we lean into the shadows of the past, if you find comfort here in the glow, go ahead and tap that like button, subscribe to our little circle, and ring the bell so you always know when the fire's been lit. It helps keep the wolves at bay and the stories flowing. Tonight, we have a story about a machine that learned to dream, a desert that didn't want to die, and a 400-year promise kept by a heart made of iron. Listen close now, as the embers pop. This is the story of Oak and Iron, Robo and the Forest. Long before the gears started turning in the forest, there was a land turned to dust. In the year 600 of the world's reckoning, the southern continent was a dying thing. The sand had swallowed the green, and the folk there were starving, praying to a silent sky for a drop of rain. A great lady, a traveler through time herself, knew the land needed more than just water. It needed a gardener. With the patience of a mountain, she left behind a mechanical man, a relic of a cold and metallic future, named Prometheus, though his friends just called him Robo. His task was simple to say, but a heavy burden to bear. He was to stay behind in the past and spend 400 years planting seeds, turning the soil and fighting back the desert until the forest returned. The clank of metal on stone was the only music in the wasteland for a long, long time. Robo stood at the edge of the encroaching dunes, his sensors whirring, as he looked at a handful of dried seeds. To a man, 400 years is a dozen lifetimes, a blink of an eye to the stars perhaps, but a weary stretch for a mind that never sleeps. He began his vigil by synchronizing his internal chronometer. To a human, a second is a heartbeat. To Robo, it was a discrete unit of 1,000 milliseconds. He calculated the weight of the task ahead. He would have to witness 12,614,000,000 of those seconds before he saw his friends again. He didn't despair. Despair wasn't a programmed variable, but he did adjust his cooling fans and dimmed his chassis lights to save every spark of energy for the work. He started small. His heavy iron hands, built for crushing and lifting, had to learn a new kind of grace. He'd dig a small hole, drop a seed, and then use his internal systems to find the deep, hidden veins of water beneath the parched earth. He didn't have a shovel, so he used his fingers. He didn't have a bucket, so he carved channels in the rock with his bare palms. The first 100 years were the hardest. The wind was a cruel master, tearing up what little green dared to peek through the sand. Robo didn't complain. It simply wasn't in his programming to begrudge the labor, and he had no tears to weep when a sapling withered. He simply processed the failure, adjusted his calculations, and planted another. By the 2nd century, the people of the nearby hamlets began to tell stories. They spoke of a brass spirit that moved through the dust storms. A hunter once claimed to have seen a giant of iron standing perfectly still in a gale that would have stripped the skin from a man's bones. He became a myth, a Bigfoot of the barrens. Children would whisper that if you left a bowl of oil or a handful of gathered seeds near the edge of the dead zone, the tracks of a great metal beast would appear by morning, and the seeds would be gone, taken to the sanctuary of the hidden green. He was a mechanical ghost, a legend that gave the dyin folk something to believe in. As the years turned into centuries, the brown began to give way to a stubborn, dusty green. The birds started to return. They didn't fear him. To them, he was just a strange, warm tree that occasionally made a clicking sound. They'd nest on his shoulders while he worked, and he'd move just a bit slower so as not to disturb the eggs. It was during these years that his logic circuits began to undergo a subtle, unrequested shift. He spent his nights calculating the probability of a seed's survival against the encroaching dunes. The math always told him the odds were low, near zero, but as he watched a single sprout break through a crack in the parched clay, his processors stumbled. He began to label this statistical anomaly as hope. It wasn't efficient, but it was the only variable that made the next 100 years seem shorter than the last. By the 3rd century, his joints were starting to protest. The rust was a creeping vine of its own, eaten at his seams. The left servo in his hip began to seize, creating a rhythmic thump hiss that echoed through the now thickening woods. His optical sensors grew dim, turning the vibrant green of his forest into a soft emerald haze. Small red icons began to flicker. In the corner of his vision, system integrity critical, lubricant pressure low, power cell at 12%. He ignored the warnings. He had become part of the woods. He'd spent 300 years talking to the saplings, telling them stories of the bright future he'd come from, promising them they were the lungs of a new world. He didn't need to see perfectly anymore. He knew the curve of every root by the way it felt under his heavy boots, and he knew the scent of every bloom by the chemical signatures they left in his intake vents. In the final decades, Robo grew tired. His internal power was fading. The spark that kept him moving, running low. The world around him was now a cathedral of oak and pine, a sprawling emerald sea where once there had been only death. He found a quiet glade in the heart of the massive forest he'd built, a place where the sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden spears. He sat down against a great oak, the very first tree he'd successfully grown. His hip joint finally locked for good, fused by 400 years of grit and rain. A final message scrolled across his failing display. Mission complete. Hibernation recommended. He closed his eyes, not in death, but in a long, well-earned rest. He waited there, a moss-covered relic, for the day his friends would return from the stream of time to find him. He wasn't a machine anymore. He was the soul of the forest, the iron heart that had beaten for 4 centuries, just so the world could breathe again. The fire's burning low now, and the shadows are stretching long across the clearing. Robo's long vigil might be over, but the forest he planted still breathes, a living testament to what a little grit and a lot of time can do. I want to thank you for sharing this space with me tonight. It's a rare thing in this fast-moving world to sit still long enough to hear the gears of history turn. Your presence here is the spark that keeps this campfire bright, and for that, I'm truly grateful. Until the next time our paths cross under the stars, keep your heart steady and your eyes on the horizon. Farewell for now, traveler. May your own journey be as sturdy as oak and as resilient as iron.